Brian and I met through a family-arranged blind date, though technically, we were high school classmates for 3 years. Back then, he was absorbed in his studies while I was often outside sketching and painting, so of course, he didn't remember me. When I found out that my date was Brian, I went out of my way to look graceful and elegant, wearing a knitted sweater and a soft-colored skirt. He was 25 or 26 by then. But he looked just like he did in high school, catching the eye of every young girl in the cafe. He showed up in a hoodie and sweatpants, looking completely unfazed by the whole setup, as if this blind date didn't even matter to him. With so many girls probably interested in him, why would he be here? I looked at him, just as awkward as I was, and asked, "So, were you forced into this?" He raised an eyebrow. "Is Miss Alice here unwillingly?" Of course, I didn't dare show any unwillingness. Deep down, I just felt a little out of place next to Brian. Back in high school, I'd sat in front of him, and every time class ended, girls would swarm over to ask him questions. Not only was he good-looking, but he was also brilliant. I, on the other hand, had always struggled with academics. Luckily, I'd always loved art, and with my parents' support, I eventually got into a decently well-known art school. "Oh, no, I just think it's surprising that someone like you, Brian, would need a blind date. This is so unusual. I'm usually pretty busy with work, so I don't have much time for dating." I felt thrilled inside, but kept my graceful, composed demeanor. If I could actually end up with Brian, it would be like a dream come true. I didn't expect us to marry so quickly after that. Probably pressured by our parents, and without many other choices, he agreed, and just like that, we were a couple. Even my best friend Molly was shocked at how fast we moved, especially since she was the only one who knew about my 10-year crush on Brian. At our engagement, she gave me a thumbs up, grinning, "Alice, only you could pull this off." But I hope Brian never finds out about my longtime crush on him. Before we married, we'd only met a handful of times, and though things moved quickly, I have to give Brian credit, he went all out for the wedding. His parents treated me kindly, and his mom, far from the overbearing mother-in-law trope, was incredibly welcoming. After all, a woman who raised someone as exceptional as Brian wouldn't be unreasonable. Following the philosophy that a wedding should be done right, Brian gave me the very best he could. My parents couldn't stop singing his praises. Sometimes, I even felt like we really were that couple who fell in love after years of knowing each other. But unfortunately, that love was only from my side. After we got married, Brian stayed home for just 1 week before he had to return to South City for work. During that newlywed week, we made sure to enjoy every moment as a couple. I started off feeling a bit shy, but soon enough, any embarrassment faded, and I happily accepted all of Brian's attentions. Sitting at the table, watching him cook, I couldn't believe how complete my life felt. All those years of doing good deeds must have finally paid off. Heaven was definitely watching out for me. When Brian brought the food to the table and looked at my slightly rumpled state, I could tell he was holding back something he wanted to say. "I'm heading back to South City tomorrow afternoon. Call me if you need anything," he said. Nodding obediently, I continued eating, feeling surprised at how quickly the week had flown by. I didn't want him to leave, but we weren't close enough for me to start acting clingy. "Tomorrow morning, I'll help you pack, and I'll take you to the train station in the afternoon," I offered, looking at him wistfully. Once he left, it would be months before we'd see each other again. Brian smiled and agreed, but that night, he wore me out to the point that I couldn't even get up in the morning. By afternoon, I managed to get myself together so I could go with him to the station. On the way there, I couldn't hold back and gave him a little punch out of frustration. He just chuckled and tousled my hair. As he prepared to leave, I felt a wave of sadness wash over me. That sadness lingered the whole ride back and hit its peak once I got home. Seeing the leftovers he'd made still sitting in the fridge made me feel a pang of longing. Lying in bed, I started counting the days until I'd see him again. Since Brian's been away, it feels like I'm back to my old life of living alone. Occasionally, I'd call him just to chat. But we'd always run out of things to say after a few minutes. Despite being married, it's like we're still strangers in some ways. Without him around, I'd often go back to my mom's for meals. My family and Brian's family both live in the same city, not too far apart. Before I got married, my mom would always find reasons to argue with me. Now that I've moved out, she's constantly calling, asking me to come over for dinner. One Friday night, as I was sprawled on the couch watching a variety show, there was a knock on the door. I instantly shot up, curious and a little nervous about who it might be. I tiptoed to the door and peeked through the peephole, only to see a familiar face, Brian, standing outside with his suitcase. Suppressing my excitement, I opened the door. "What are you doing back? Is it a holiday?" "No, just a regular weekend." Was he coming back every weekend now? It felt a bit too much? No, surely that was just my imagination. Isn't it a bit expensive to come back and forth so often? After all, train tickets aren't cheap. If he came back every weekend, could we really afford it? Brian raised an eyebrow, his expression turning slightly hurt. Realizing my mistake, I quickly added, "I didn't mean it like that. I'm actually really happy you're here." And I meant it. Don't worry. From now on, I'll hand over my salary. He reached out and playfully ruffled my hair. This move was becoming his favorite thing. At 6 feet 2 inches, he practically towered over me, who was just barely 5 feet 3 inches. "That's not what I meant." "You don't need to hand over your salary," I mumbled against his chest. The next day, I ended up sleeping in until noon, only to find Brian already in the kitchen cooking. I checked my phone and instantly woke up, thinking my paycheck had hit, only to realize it was way too much. Looking closer, I saw Brian had transferred his salary to me. Seeing his earnings made me feel a bit self-conscious. Is this what they mean by the divide between people's worlds? Still, I declined the transfer. It felt too controlling to ask for his whole salary. He deserved some space. While I was lost in thought, Brian's phone lit up with a message. Out of instinct, I glanced over and saw it was from our old classmate Rick. From what I remembered, Rick was a lively guy, one of the few friends Brian had kept in touch with. "Brian, are you free this afternoon?" It looked like he was inviting him out, they'd always been close. But the next line made my heart sink. "Susie's back too, and she wants to catch up with you." In high school, Brian and Susie were desk mates, sharing the same interests, both top students. Always lending each other notes. They had this perfect balance. I used to think that if Brian liked anyone, it would have been Susie. After all, they sat together for so long. The more I thought about it, the worse I felt. Had Brian really come home to see me, or to meet Susie? At lunch, Brian must have noticed my off mood. He asked me gently what was wrong. "It's nothing, I'm just a little tired." "Don't worry. I won't do that tonight," he joked. Normally, a comment like that would have left me blushing, but today, my sadness outweighed any embarrassment. I only managed a small nod. "I'm going out this afternoon," Brian said, looking at me with a hopeful smile. "Do you want to come with me?" So he was really going. I knew he'd probably prefer me not to tag along, so I politely declined and made a last-minute plan to meet Molly for tea. When I said no, he even pretended to look disappointed. "Brian, who are you really?" "Alice, what's wrong with you? Why suffer like this?" He asked if you wanted to go, so just go with him. Molly was exasperated. "I just don't feel like seeing Susie." "Ugh, come on. You're Brian's legit wife now." I bet no one from high school expected that Brian and I would actually end up married. Then Molly turned to gossip. "But did you hear? Susie recently got divorced." She was even married? I was genuinely shocked, but a thought suddenly hit me. Had Brian stayed single all these years because the person he liked was already married? And now that Susie was divorced, she got married right after college. But we weren't close. So it's no wonder she didn't tell us. Fair enough. I forced a smile. But her wanting to see Brian after her divorce, she's obviously up to something. Let's not talk about her. But deep down, I wondered, if Susie confessed her feelings, how would Brian respond? Would this marriage between us, which had no emotional foundation, hold up? Molly and I stayed out until the evening. We found a Japanese restaurant, had dinner, and lingered long after. Both of us reluctant to go home. I realized I was sulking, resentful that my husband was off seeing another woman. Molly, ever the instigator, kept stirring things up. Her free-spirited nature led her to suggest we go to a bar to drink our worries away. I eagerly agreed, but then saw I'd missed several calls from Brian and lost my nerve. Oh no, I didn't check my phone. Brian called me a bunch of times. So what? He can meet up with another woman. But you can't go have a drink? He's not seeing her alone, his friend is there too. Fine, I get it, Alice, you're hopeless when it comes to him. I'll just call him back. I rushed outside the restaurant to return his call, and he answered immediately. Where are you? Are you done yet? Brian's warm, deep voice filled the line, and instantly, all thoughts of going out drinking vanished. Guilt flooded me. I'm done. I'll head home now. I'll come get you. Send me your location. It's okay, I'll just grab a cab. It's late, and it's not safe for you to go alone. I'm already on my way, just wait there. Okay. I went back to our table, and Molly gave me a look, clearly noticing the change in my mood. Sweetie, why don't you have Brian drop me off too? Get lost. I've got plans. Next time. I swear. Shoo. Fine, I'm out. Not long after, Brian's car pulled up. I spotted it and eagerly waved, practically skipping over to the door and getting in. Once I closed the door, he looked at me intently without starting the car. For a second, I wondered if he was going to do something right here. That would be so embarrassing. Just as he reached out, I leaned over, cupped his face, and gave him a quick kiss. Thanks for picking me up, Brian. He was momentarily stunned, then took my hand and kissed it. I suddenly realized we'd never actually kissed like this before. His kiss was so gentle, and I couldn't help but wrap my arms around his neck. The honking from a car behind us broke the moment. Embarrassed, I pushed him away, realizing we'd been blocking the way at the restaurant entrance. Brian leaned over, gently buckling my seatbelt before starting the car to head home. So that's what he was trying to do, help me with my seatbelt. I turned, suddenly too shy to look at him. But his lips were so soft, and his scent still had that same fresh, clean warmth I remembered from high school. He drove quickly, and soon we were home. He took my hand as we walked into the elevator, and I watched the numbers go up, my heart racing. As soon as we got inside, he closed the door, pressed me against it, and kissed me deeply. After a while, it wasn't enough, he picked me up and carried me to the bedroom, gently laying me on the bed and leaning in close. Half awake, I glanced up at Brian and remembered him in high school, helping Susie with her homework, their heads close together. It felt like a world I wasn't part of, just the girl who liked running off to the store for yogurt after class. Back then, he was so quiet, only talking if someone spoke to him first. He'd sit in his seat, silent and alone. But Brian's changed since we married. So what if he and Susie were a good match? In the end, it's me who's married to him now. Maybe to make our long-distance marriage feel less lonely, Brian would make a point to come home whenever he had time off. My mom, surprised, asked how he still managed to come back from South City so often. And I boasted that he came back every week. After that, she stopped inviting me home for weekend dinners. Since I moved in, the house had shifted from its cold, monochrome tones to a warmer palette. With plenty of free time, I bought a huge cream-colored rug for the living room. I regretted it immediately, it didn't match the house at all, but I loved the color too much to care. I ended up buying other items in similar shades. But they still didn't quite fit in. The big cream rug was especially out of place. When Molly came over the next day, she eyed the rug thoughtfully. "This has you written all over it." I bet Brian just went speechless when he saw it. "Is it really that mismatched?" I said with a touch of drama. "You know, Brian and I are like this rug and this house. Mismatched is mismatched, people will always see us as not quite fitting." Molly plopped down on the rug without hesitation. "Oh, stop it. Another weekend's coming up. Any plans?" I pulled 2 cans of soda from the fridge and handed her one. "Good thing you reminded me. Remember our old class president? He's organizing a reunion this weekend and invited everyone to dinner." "Did he hit the jackpot? Treating everyone to dinner?" "Same old show-off," Molly said, taking a sip. "But won't Susie be there too? Aren't you worried about her running into Brian again?" "I could just tell him you two have plans if you'd rather skip it." "It's fine, Brian and I are married now." "What could she do? She wouldn't break up someone's family, would she?" In my mind, Susie was too proud for that. "True, no reason to avoid her," Molly said with a nod. The class president had booked a fancy hotel for the reunion, and the news stirred up our high school group chat. It had been quiet for years, but suddenly, everyone was talking again. On the eve of the holiday, Brian returned from South City. Though it hadn't been long since I last saw him, he looked thinner. He worked so hard, and I couldn't help but feel a pang of worry. As soon as he walked in, I ran over and hugged him around the neck. "You're back." In his windbreaker, he looked as cool and handsome as he did in high school. With his youthful style, people often mistook us for a couple in a younger guy, older girl relationship. With one hand supporting me and the other pulling his suitcase, his hands, those perfectly shaped hands, were a visual treat for someone like me who's a hand fanatic. He paused suddenly, looking at something. I followed his gaze. He was looking at my cream-colored rug. "Maybe I should just take it away or bring it to my mom's." "No, leave it. I like it. The house was too dark before, this color brightens it up." He set his bag aside, wrapped his arms around my waist, and pulled me onto the sofa with him. "Are you tired? Why don't you take a nap, and I'll make you a snack." I was sitting on his lap when he buried his face in my neck. Like a big puppy taking in my scent. "You smell amazing. Are you hungry?" Brian lifted his head, his lean arms holding me close as he leaned in to kiss me. I quickly covered his mouth with my hand. "I'm asking if you're hungry." Brian looked visibly disappointed. "I'm not hungry. I just want to kiss my wife." "Can't I even do that?" Seeing his pitiful look, I gave him a light peck on the cheek. "Even if you're not hungry, you need to eat. You've lost weight. Haven't you been eating properly?" While I was cooking noodles, Brian came up and hugged me from behind. I suddenly wondered, when had Brian become so affectionate? Back in school, he was always so aloof, barely speaking to anyone. When I served the noodles, the way he ate brought back memories. Back then, he was always so focused, striding with purpose to the cafeteria or back to the dorm. And I could never keep up. He ate the same way, quickly, as if he had somewhere more important to be. At that time, I thought studying was his whole world, an unstoppable drive to reach higher, while I was always left behind. True to form, the noodles I'd taken 10 minutes to make, he finished in a minute, then quickly washed the pot and bowl. "Did you see? The class president invited us to a reunion dinner tomorrow night." While Brian unpacked, I chatted from the sofa. "Yeah, I saw. It's been so many years, our first reunion. Anyone you're looking forward to seeing?" I wanted to ask about Susie, but I didn't want him to think I was insecure. "No." He looked at me. "What about you? Anyone you want to see?" If we weren't married, Brian would have been the one I most wanted to see. Maybe 1 or 2 people. He looked surprised, but didn't ask further. Saturday came. And I spent ages deciding on what to wear before finally settling on a chic, pink Chanel-inspired outfit. To make sure I looked impeccable from head to toe, I even went out with Molly for a pampering session in the morning, coming back home only around noon. After a deep nap, I finally woke up, glancing at the clock. I'd practically passed out and slept until 4 or 5 in the afternoon. Brian hadn't even bothered to wake me. So I scrambled to get up, put on my makeup, and change. As I curled my hair, I noticed Brian watching me, looking less than thrilled. His voice was cool as he asked, "Are any of your old classmates really that important?" Okay, men don't understand these things. This is about competition between women. And Susie would be there, too. When rivals meet, tensions run high. No, not at all. Busy getting ready, I brushed him off. But he insisted on leaning in for a kiss, ruining the lipstick I'd just put on. No, Brian. I pushed him aside. No kisses allowed. Brian's face darkened, and he sat quietly without a word. Even in the car on the way to the hotel, he remained silent, icy as ever. I'm not one to smooth things over, and since he wouldn't talk, I had no idea how to cheer him up. We just sat in silence the whole way there. When we arrived, our class president, Mike, who'd been tall and slim in high school, now looked a bit prosperous, as if his success had brought some extra pounds. As soon as he saw Brian and me, he called out from a distance, "Is that Brian and Alice?" Most people didn't know we'd gotten married. Now, walking in with Brian, I could feel everyone's curiosity sparking. Molly waved me over, so I took a seat next to her. And Brian sat down on my other side. Our old classmates were all sneaking glances at us. The class president clapped Brian on the shoulder and announced, "I bet most of you don't know, Brian and Alice are married now." Everyone looked stunned. Suddenly, we were the center of attention, and my social anxiety kicked in. So, who chased whom? Back in school, you two didn't seem close at all. Yeah, who was it? Brian was never the type to make the first move. I'd guess Alice went after him. I was flustered, unsure of what to say, and thought about just claiming we'd met through a matchmaking event. I was the one who pursued her, Brian's calm voice answered beside me. I was about to explain when someone else chimed in. Of course, Brian went after our Alice. She's gorgeous. I looked over to see Bill, who looked every inch the trendy playboy, leaning casually against the door. Bill. Both Molly and I hadn't seen him in ages. In school, Bill had been the classic rich kid, living lavishly and never keeping much distance with friends. He'd always been more of a casual friend, not someone we were particularly close to. Bill swaggered over, greeted everyone, then gave my face a playful pat in front of the entire group before sitting next to Molly. If we weren't in front of everyone, I really would have loved to give him a piece of my mind. I could feel Brian getting even colder beside me. After all, I'd refused to let him touch my face when we left the house, yet here I was, letting Bill do it. Soon, everyone arrived, including Susie. She wore a beige dress, her long black hair straight and glossy like some storybook goddess. Of course, the only seat left was right next to Brian. She immediately started talking to him, treating me like I was invisible from the start. Feeling annoyed, I turned to my food to distract myself. Everyone else was catching up, and midway through the meal, Brian stepped out. Not even a minute later, Susie followed him. Molly and Bill noticed and immediately leaned in. They teased Brian and Susie in front of me. Seriously, Alice, you're letting him get away with that? Bill teased, winking at me. You don't get it, Molly sighed, clearly frustrated with me. Brian and Susie even met up privately, and just a little attention from him is enough for her to forgive him. Angry now, I demanded some drinks and downed a few with Molly. When Brian came back and saw me drinking, he frowned, his slender hand reaching over to take my glass. You've never drunk before. Don't overdo it. I was already tipsy and didn't intend to drink more. But then I overheard one of Susie's friends saying how close Susie and Brian had been back in school, and wondering aloud why he'd ended up with me. I couldn't hold my anger any longer, ignoring Brian's warning and grabbing the glass to take another drink. The class president and Bill, not the most sensitive types, cheered me on, calling me a woman among heroes. I have no idea how I made it home. Before we left, I even told Molly she should hurry up and get married. By the time we reached the car, I was too unsteady to walk, and Brian ended up dragging me to the car while I babbled away. The next morning, I woke up completely blank on what I'd said after drinking. Apparently, blackouts are real. I sat up, feeling utterly lost. It must have upset Brian, seeing me drink like that. He barely spoke to me afterward, and I quietly apologized, promising I wouldn't drink like that again. But he still seemed unsatisfied. Had I done something unforgivable while drunk? He hardly spoke to me the entire holiday. At night, he even turned his back on me while we slept. Usually, he'd snuggle close, as clingy as a big puppy, but now he seemed determined to keep his distance. Brian even decided to return to South City 2 days early. Watching him pack, I rehearsed my words over and over before finally speaking up. Are you still mad at me? No. Then why are you leaving so soon? I felt a little hurt. I hadn't even been mad about him and Susie. There's work to deal with. Since Brian returned to South City after the holiday, he hasn't come back, not every weekend like he used to. I invited Molly out for dinner to vent my frustrations. What on earth did I do that day? How would I know? I was pretty drunk too. Molly replied nonchalantly. How did you get home afterward? Bill drove me. He asked how you and Brian ended up married, so I just told him the truth. You two met through a matchmaking event. I sighed, feeling dejected. Molly noticed my mood and started criticizing Brian. He's still tangled up with Susie and has the nerve to be angry with you? You just had a drink. He used to come back every week. But it's been over a month since I've seen him. What a jerk. You shouldn't tolerate a guy who gives you the cold shoulder. Over the past month, I sometimes texted Brian to ask if he was coming home, but his replies were always the same: work was busy, and he didn't have time to come back. When I asked if work was tiring, he'd just say, "It's fine," even ignoring all my cute, flirty emojis. After dinner, we lingered at the restaurant. And out of boredom, I opened my social media. Since the class reunion, Susie had been posting a lot more frequently, sharing sentimental quotes like "those who understand you will always understand you," and round, "it's still you." I was baffled by her behavior. This time, she posted a photo taken outside her office building with the caption, "A fresh start." The location was in South City. And I realized it was the same company where Brian worked. I felt my heart race with anxiety. Oh no, Alice. It looks like you're about to be cheated on, Molly exclaimed, even more upset than I was. You're not usually this timid. It could just be a coincidence. Even though I was feeling chaotic inside, I still believed Brian wouldn't do anything like that. I just lacked the confidence, my voice growing softer. Molly took a sip of her coffee. Watching me closely, in a relationship, communication is key. If you have questions, just ask him. If he really is involved with someone else, then you shouldn't hesitate to walk away. I understood her point. I used to think like that before dating, but now I was afraid of breaking that delicate barrier. The truth was, I didn't want to lose Brian. I'd liked him quietly for so many years. And now we'd finally become a couple. The next day at work, I was distracted, wondering how far things had progressed between Brian and Susie. Staring blankly at my computer, I realized Brian hadn't initiated a message to me in days. Whenever I reached out, he just gave me short, dismissive replies. During lunch, my colleague Coco asked me about my work progress. And I felt embarrassed admitting I hadn't made any. Women have a keen sense for these things. Coco immediately came over, her curiosity piqued. Did you and your husband have a fight? No, not really. He just doesn't pay me any attention. If you've done something wrong, just shower him with affection. Men can't resist their beautiful wives. But we're in a long-distance relationship. He's working in South City and hasn't come back lately for some reason. Why not just go see him? If he doesn't want to come back, go to him and clear the air. New Year's is just around the corner, it's the perfect time to celebrate together. It suddenly hit me, ever since we got married. Brian had always come back to spend holidays with me. I'd never made an effort to visit him. Now, I had no idea what I had done while drunk that upset him, so it was time to get clarity. With newfound determination, the days flew by. I texted Brian daily, but kept my plans to visit him for New Year's a secret, wanting to surprise him. 2 days before New Year's, I boarded a high-speed train with my luggage and traveled for several hours until I finally arrived in South City. Back in high school, I had spent quite a bit of time here studying painting at an art studio, so I was somewhat familiar with the area. After taking a taxi to Brian's apartment, it hit me that I had never been there before and didn't know the entry code. I found myself awkwardly waiting outside. I had intended to text Brian to hurry back, but just as I took out my phone, it died from low battery. I had never felt this unlucky in my 26 years. I crouched next to my suitcase, watching as darkness fell. Office workers returned home and glanced at me strangely. My social anxiety kicked in, and I covered my face, waiting for Brian. After what felt like ages, the hallway was empty, and Brian still hadn't come back. Just as I was about to doze off, I heard the elevator ding. Thinking it must be Brian, I looked up and saw him wearing a thin black down jacket, looking weary and slowly making his way toward me. When he finally glanced down and noticed me, he paused for a moment before quickly walking over. "Why are you just getting back now?" I asked, slightly irritated. He didn't respond but instead opened the apartment door, took my hand, and pulled me inside while dragging my suitcase. Before I could say another word, he plopped me down on the bed, which was hard and uncomfortable. Just before he came closer, I suddenly remembered the reason I was there and pushed him away. "Wait, I came here to talk things through." "Talk about what?" "About you and Susie, Anne. What happened when I got drunk?" Brian looked at me quietly for a few moments, his dark eyes filled with confusion. He scratched his head and said, "Me and Susie? You've met her several times and act like you don't know her. She works at the same company as you, right?" I glared at him, feeling frustrated. "I don't know where she works. And I really don't know her well. We've only seen each other at class reunions over the years." "I don't believe you. You must be in contact with her privately. I'm not as smart as you, so it's easy for you to lie to me." The frustrations of the past few days welled up, and before I knew it, tears streamed down my face. "If you regret this, just get a divorce. Ever since that class reunion, you've been ignoring me, and when you do text, it's always so dismissive." Seeing my tears, Brian had no choice but to pull me into his arms and said firmly, "I've never regretted anything, nor have I ever thought about getting a divorce. My relationship with Susie is just that of former classmates. I don't have her contact information and have never met her privately. If you don't believe me, check my phone." Brian pulled out his phone, offering it to me with sincerity. I felt a mix of grievance and determination. If I was going to check, I was going to check thoroughly. I carefully went through his contacts and WhatsApp messages. He truly didn't have any contact information for Susie. Then I stumbled upon the conversation with Rick that had been bothering me. "Rick, Brian, are you free this afternoon?" "Rick, Susie just came back recently. And I was thinking of having her meet up with you today." "Brian, what does she want to meet me for?" "Rick, maybe she want to rekindle things with you." "Brian, I'm already married. If that's the case, I won't go. You guys enjoy yourselves." "Rick, come on, I'll just tell her we're all busy. Just come out and hang with the guys." So that's how he replied to Rick. My heart felt like it was floating on soft, fluffy clouds. I couldn't express my happiness. Indeed, the most crucial aspect of marriage is communication. I obediently put his phone back in Brian's pocket and smiled. So what are you really upset about? His expression shifted slightly as he slowly held my chin and said through gritted teeth, I'm mad at you for what you said when you were drunk. I wanted to clarify things, but he wouldn't say a word. Instead, he pinned me down on the bed. And every time I tried to ask for more details, he thrust into me even harder. Finally, after some persistent questioning, I discovered what he was upset about. That day when I got drunk, I wouldn't stop rambling. When we got back to the car, Brian thought it would be fun to chat with me, but I was still fixated on his ambiguous relationship with Susie. I swayed and said, Don't you have a crush? I have a secret crush too. I imagined that Brian's face must have turned dark at that moment. He immediately asked if I still liked that person. I answered confidently, of course. I really like him. I've liked him for 10 years. He had no idea that I was talking about him, the man I had secretly loved for a decade. Unfortunately, I never got the chance to explain, and he only grew angrier while I struggled to find my voice. Later, he was working nearby with his shirt off, and I couldn't help but lightly punch him a couple of times. Why is your apartment bed so hard? I'll get a mattress someday. I charged my phone and powered it back on, getting ready to explain my secret crush to Brian. After some thought, I tentatively asked him, Are you still mad at me? Brian closed his laptop, pinched my cheeks, and said through gritted teeth, You'd better not mention that guy again. If you promise not to like him anymore, I won't be mad. I wanted to tease him a little. It's impossible not to like him. I think I'm starting to like him even more. Alice. He didn't want to engage with me anymore. Realizing it was best not to provoke him further, I opened my phone and accessed my private album. The album contains photos of Brian from high school, which I extracted from all our group shots. From freshman to senior year, there are pictures from choir concerts, sports events, cultural performances, and our coming-of-age ceremony, right up to the last graduation photo featuring Brian. Though he has the same expression in every photo, each one has been cherished by me for years. I've wanted to tell him countless times how much I like him, I adore his quiet nature, appreciate his silent efforts, and love how he seems unaffected by the world around him. I would create opportunities to run into him on the way to and from school, trying to catch his attention. When I'd be painting in the art studio late into the night, just looking at his pictures would motivate me to improve and become someone worthy of him. But I was always too shy to express my feelings, keeping my affection locked away for fear that he might find out. I always thought I would finally share my feelings after graduation. Unsurprisingly, he got accepted into a prestigious university. I remember seeing his name and photo at the top of the honor roll and thinking, his university is amazing, but it's so far from mine. I never managed to express my feelings before we graduated. He didn't know how anxious I was when I found out from my mom that he was my blind date. He also didn't realize how happy I was to marry him. I handed my phone to Brian, beaming, This is the man I've liked for 10 years. Isn't he handsome? Honestly, confessing my feelings to Brian and revealing my long-standing crush was something I regretted. After all, Brian appears serious on the outside but is actually quite playful on the inside. When I finished my confession, he was taken aback for a moment. However, a few seconds later, he reverted to his usual self, acting like a big puppy as he showered me with hugs and kisses, even showcasing a new skill. Brian, you can kiss me, but no nibbling. Caught up in his affectionate kisses, I completely forgot that since arriving in South City, I hadn't eaten a single hot meal. After my long trip to find him and waiting for hours at the apartment door while hungry, my stomach was already protesting loudly. So just as Brian and I were lost in the moment, my stomach chose that exact moment to interrupt. Embarrassed, I pushed him away slightly. He laughed at my discomfort but soon rolled off the bed and walked towards the door. Watching his tall figure, I asked, "Where are you going?" "Cooking." Before long, the delicious aroma of food drifted from the kitchen. I have to admit, Brian is quite a talented cook. I followed the mouth-watering scent into the kitchen, and maybe it was just my hunger, but everything smelled incredible. Brian sat across from me, smiling as he watched me devour the food. Wow. When a handsome guy smiles, it's truly a knockout. "Have you been waiting for me long at the door?" "Yeah. You were the last one to return from your floor. Why are you always working late?" I had thought he was out messing around, but seeing him look so exhausted when he got back made me feel a bit sympathetic. "Are you worried about me?" He hadn't stopped smiling since he walked in. "I have tomorrow off, and I'll take you out to celebrate New Year's." The next day, I didn't wake up until nearly noon. I was surprised to find that Brian remembered my complaint about his bed being too hard. He dragged me to the mall to pick out a new mattress. Once we arrived at the mall, I spotted a great-looking restaurant and suggested we have a big lunch before shopping. While we were waiting for our food, I headed to the restroom, only to run into the last person I wanted to see, Susie. At first, I thought about pretending not to know her. We hardly spoke in high school, and during the reunion, she acted like I didn't exist. Just as I was about to walk past her, she called out to me, and I reluctantly turned around. "You're here in South City to see Brian, aren't you?" She was slightly taller than me, looking down at me with a condescending expression. If I had known I'd run into her today, I would have worn heels. "What's it to you?" I glared at her coldly. "I suggest you stop clinging to him, it's pointless to force him." "I already know." "When have I ever forced him?" "What do you think you know? His marriage to you is merely due to family pressure, he's been waiting for me all these years." Susie paused, her gaze scanning me in a way that was infuriating. "Now that I'm divorced, I work at the same company as him. I'm the one who's truly right for him. Don't cling to him any longer." I went silent again. If I hadn't looked at Brian's phone that night, I might have actually believed Susie's nonsense. I had never seen anyone so confidently spouting off about breaking up someone else's family. "How do you know I'm the one forcing Brian?" I lifted my chin defiantly. "Even though I'm not very tall, I wasn't about to lose in terms of spirit. He's in the store waiting to have lunch with me. If you don't believe me, go see for yourself and ask him if I'm clinging to him. And you, stop posting those captions on social media all the time. You and Brian aren't even friends, he can't see them. You can't even get him to meet up with you. Where do you get the confidence that he didn't marry before because he was waiting for you? Besides, Brian and I are already married. I hope you'll learn to respect yourself." I had wanted to say this for ages, and all the frustrations I had bottled up over the past few months finally came pouring out, giving me a feeling of liberation. After saying that, I couldn't be bothered to check out the myriad expressions on her face and just turned to leave. When I returned to my seat, the food was already served. Brian hadn't eaten a single bite. He was quietly waiting for me. Somehow, his demeanor made him seem rather endearing. Maybe it was the satisfaction from confronting Susie, but I felt much lighter and happier. Our afternoon shopping trip went smoothly, and I was excited to hear about the countdown event happening at the South City Square tonight. Suddenly, I recalled that the last time I had seen the New Year's fireworks in South City was back in my sophomore year of high school. 7 or 8 years had flown by in the blink of an eye. After Brian stashed our purchases in the car, he suggested we catch a movie. I thought about how this would be our first time at the cinema together, which felt quite significant. He bought couple seats, and I waited as he picked up the tickets. It was New Year's Eve, and the cinema was bustling with people. He naturally took my hand, guiding me to the back row. I had been focused on the movie's storyline, but Brian kept toying with my fingers, caressing them in a deliberately flirtatious way. At first, I intended to ignore him, but he kept pushing the boundaries. Before long, he had me snug in his arms, and I was enveloped by his cool youthful scent. It felt so fresh and innocent. I chuckled at my own thoughts. Brian and I were both 26, yet here we were acting so childlike. Ever since that night, Brian had turned into a clingy sweetheart, constantly wanting kisses and hugs like a needy golden retriever I couldn't shake off. I could see right through him. He clearly wasn't interested in watching the movie. Thankfully, the darkness of the cinema concealed all his little antics, sparing me some embarrassment. When the movie ended, there were still over 20 minutes until the countdown. People began to head towards the square for the New Year celebrations. By the time Brian and I arrived, the square was already a sea of people. Brian held my hand tightly, as if he was worried I would get lost. We stood surrounded by the brightly lit skyscrapers, waiting for the new year, along with the crowd of people holding balloons. I noticed all the couples cuddling together, and Brian and I blended right in. As the countdown began, the crowd stirred with excitement, all shouting, 10, 9, 8, 7. I stood on my tiptoes, turning Brian's face to meet mine. Looking into his serious, dark eyes, I asked loudly, "Brian, do you like me?" Without skipping a beat. His lips turned up in a smile. "I love you, Alice." Fireworks exploded behind him, and the cheers of the crowd filled my ears, but all I could see was the way he looked tonight. He leaned down, bringing his lips close to mine and giving me the first kiss of the year. We spent the New Year's Eve at my mother-in-law's house, where she hadn't seen us for a long time. She woke up early to hit the market and buy a ton of delicious food. Seeing such a large spread of my favorite dishes filled me with happiness. Brian and I stayed in his old room, the one he lived in until high school graduation. It was much bigger than my childhood room. The style matched the rest of the house perfectly, simple black, white, and gray. I couldn't help but think, this is so Brian. After being married for over a year, I finally had the chance to explore Brian's room. Most of his things had been moved to our little home, but there was still a large bookshelf filled with his extracurricular books and high school textbooks. His mother had organized all of Brian's awards and certificates neatly. Looking at all those accolades, I couldn't help but say, "Brian, you're really amazing. Didn't you always know that?" He replied with a raised eyebrow, a smug grin on his face. Ever since my long-standing crush on him was revealed, he had become even more self-assured, constantly teasing me about it. Brian's textbooks had nothing extra in them aside from his notes, which was a stark contrast to mine. I used to doodle all sorts of little illustrations when I was bored in class. And my books were definitely not something I could show anyone without feeling embarrassed. Suddenly, I noticed something strange yet familiar among the awards and certificates. I pulled it out and opened it. It was an old marker drawing of Snoopy. The drawing felt so familiar, I remembered creating it myself. Looking down, I saw the signature, Alice. Suddenly, memories flooded back. This was my entry for the cultural festival in my sophomore year. I had carved out time to work on it, despite my busy academic schedule. Later, when the school switched out the exhibition board, our artwork had been discarded. Back in sophomore year, I held the drawing up to Brian. When he noticed it, he quickly snatched it from my hands, unwilling to let me see it again. I chased after him, asking where it had come from. And his face turned bright red. "Brian, did you secretly like me all along?" Epilogue: The secret of a secret crush. Brian, when high school started, Alice sat right in front of me. At first, I didn't really pay her any attention. In fact, I hardly noticed anyone in class. But since she was directly in front of me, it was hard not to notice her. I noticed that at the beginning of the semester, she was very eager to learn. Being shorter and sitting a few rows back meant she often had to crane her neck to see the blackboard. At some point during chemistry class, she got tired of looking up and just buried her head in her work, scribbling away without a care. Every time the teacher called on someone to come to the board, she would almost bury her face in her book, too scared to even glance up. As if I don't know were written on her forehead. Seeing her like that always made me want to tease her a little. I can't tell if the chemistry teacher felt the same way, but Alice was definitely the one he always called on. There was one time when the teacher asked the group leaders to check homework. I finished going through everyone else's work, but Alice hesitated to hand hers over. In the end, after a bit of coaxing, she reluctantly gave it to me. I initially thought she hadn't done anything, but when I opened her notebook, I was taken aback. The pages were filled with her doodles. While the teacher was explaining the exercises, she had drawn all kinds of cartoon versions of him at the bottom of the pages. I have to admit, whether it was the way the teacher moved or the few strands of hair left on his head, she captured them both quite well in her drawings. Later, when I was doing my chemistry homework at home, I often thought of those drawings and thought of her. At school, I found myself sneaking glances at her to see what she was up to. I also noticed when she wasn't around because she was off at her specialty classes. As for the drawing I found at my house, I remembered that the school held a cultural festival and the homeroom teacher had designated a few art students to submit their works. Once she finished her piece, she spent several class breaks coloring it, and it ended up being displayed as an exhibit for a week. That day, after evening study, I stayed in class for 10 more minutes to finish the last difficult problem. On my way home, I ran into the staff changing the exhibition boards. They were about to throw Alice's drawing in the trash, but I stopped them and took it home instead. I thought it would be a shame to just throw away something she had worked so hard on. After graduation, naturally, we lost touch, but occasionally I would still think of Alice, slowly realizing that I must have had feelings for her all along. Just 2 years after graduating from college, my mom could no longer stand the fact that I was still single at 25 or 26. I don't know when it started, but every time I went home, the conversation inevitably turned to my lack of a girlfriend. So, my mom began to pressure me into blind dates. My mom is a woman of action. Once she decides to do something, she jumps right in. She started searching for girls with backgrounds similar to mine for me to meet. That's when I saw Alice's name on my mom's list. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence of having the same name. Alice is beautiful, lively, and talkative. I figured she must have already found someone special to share her life with. But when I saw her photo, I realized it was indeed Alice. So, I told my mom I was willing to go on a blind date, and she was over the moon, quickly arranging everything. On the day of our date, I arrived early. Honestly, I just couldn't sit still at home. I despised myself for being so aimless, and for having made it to this age without a girlfriend. I was incredibly nervous. We hadn't seen each other much since high school, and she looked much more beautiful and mature now. We chatted back and forth, and it seemed her family was also urging her to get married, so everything went smoothly between us. How could I treat her poorly? After all, I couldn't think of anything luckier than marrying someone I had liked for so long. I used to live alone in South City, only coming home during Christmas, but after getting married, I found myself wishing I could go home every day. However, Alice didn't seem to want me to go back. Maybe she just wanted a formal marriage to avoid her parents' pressure. I really didn't know. Later, Rick invited me out to meet them, which I really wasn't keen on. I had finally come home to see my wife, only to waste an entire afternoon. But that night, Alice was the first to kiss me, and I thought to myself that this trip home was truly worth it. I looked forward to every weekend back in South City, wanting to spend more time with Alice. Just the thought of it gave me hope. In the past, the class monitor from high school had mentioned organizing a reunion, but I didn't care much about it. Those classmates I wanted to see would naturally meet up on their own, and I didn't have anyone else I particularly missed. Alice was completely different. She cared a lot about it, probably more than about spending time with me. Early in the morning, she went to get her hair done with her good friend, and when she returned, she spent time picking out her outfit and curling her hair. She made sure to look perfect from head to toe. So, I guessed she might be seeing someone special, and she indeed confirmed it. On the way to the hotel, I didn't say much. She thought I was angry, and honestly, I was a bit upset. But I could accept that she had someone important in her life. As long as she could gradually forget them and, in time, learn to like me. I had a reasonable suspicion that the person Alice wanted to see was Bill. Back in school, she and Bill were pretty close. When Bill showed up, he touched Alice's face, which made me even more annoyed. In the midst of this, my phone buzzed in my pocket, so I stepped outside to take the call. Just as I hung up, someone suddenly hugged me from behind. I thought it was Alice, but as soon as I realized something was off, I pushed her away. It turned out to be Susie. She told me she had liked me for a long time, but I made it clear that I had never liked her and only considered her a regular classmate. She didn't believe me what I said. I used to think she was quite serious. If I had known, I should have gone to the men's restroom to take the call. I couldn't believe she would dare to follow me in. When I finally managed to shake off Susie and returned, I saw Alice sitting there, drinking alone, with a flushed face. The dinner was almost over, and she was completely drunk, mumbling to herself. At that moment, I thought, she's really cute. In the car, she drunkenly said, "Aren't you involved with someone?" I have a crush too. I was taken aback. My heart tightening. I couldn't resist asking if she still liked that person, and she replied that she liked him a lot, had always liked him, and had been in love with him for 10 years. I had harbored a crush on her for a decade, and she had a crush on someone else for just as long. But did she know? Having a crush was really quite dull. Yet, I felt I was luckier than her, because I was with the person I loved. I told her that I was rather dull. And ever since that day, I had been a bit cold toward Alice. Later, when I returned home, my mom noticed my aloofness toward Alice immediately and pulled me aside to ask what was going on. I lied and told her it was just a minor disagreement. A minor disagreement? She was so proactive in talking to you, and you acted like someone owed you money. You chose her as your wife, you should treat her well. The truth is, I didn't want to act this way. But I couldn't stop thinking about what she said that night. It felt dishonest to say I didn't care. When I got back to South City, I threw myself into work, volunteering for overtime. With more tasks at hand, I naturally didn't think about those romantic feelings. I visited home less frequently, but the one good thing was that Alice was much more enthusiastic than before, reaching out to me every day to chat. During that period, I lost all sense of time and thought it was just another ordinary evening when I finished work and dragged my tired body home. I thought I was imagining things when I saw Alice squatting at my front door, bundled up like a little rabbit. I had no idea how long she had been waiting for me. At that moment, my heart softened, and I couldn't bring myself to stay angry with her. Whether she still liked someone else didn't matter anymore. I just wanted to spend my life happily with her. That night, we cleared everything up. When she showed me something on her phone, she was beaming, her doe-like eyes sparkling as if filled with crushed stars. She told me that I was the one she had liked for the past 10 years. I felt incredibly happy. My heart raced just like it did on the day I married her. The end.